doesn't tell you to be strong. It doesn't tell you to simply overcome things the way people do. It doesn't tell you to go back to being who you were before, because maybe that's exactly the part no one told you. You're not going back to being exactly who you were before. Recent studies on emotional recovery show that most people who have experienced severe depression believe they will never be the same as before. And these people are right. They're just wrong about what that means. You're not going to be the same person. You're going to be something that person could never have been. When we combine the philosophy of Kintsugi with other philosophies, such as mono-no awareness, wabi-sabi, and ikigai, we have a series of philosophies that help us see life and wounds from a different perspective. This shows us that the things that have happened to us make us unique. The fact that we have overcome all of life's adversities makes us special. But it also shows us that we will not return to being as we were before. But we don't need to go back to being who we were. We need to move forward. But to truly understand this, not just as a pretty phrase, but as something you can feel in your body, I need to tell you Grace's story. Before we get to the video, I want to say that this video does not replace the need for professional help. I want you to know that depression and anxiety are serious problems and that you don't need to be afraid to seek help. Your life is very important. Never give up fighting for yourself. Now let's move on to Grace's story. Chapter 1. The Weight No One Sees. Grace was 30 years old and had the weariness of someone who had lived 3 lives. Not the kind of tiredness that disappears after a good night's sleep. The other kind. The kind you feel in your bones. The kind that's there when you wake up and is still there when you close your eyes. She grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in a house where the silence was louder than any argument. Her father left when she was 6 years old. No goodbye, no explanation. One day he was there, the next he was gone, and nobody talked about it as if it were a secret everyone knew, but nobody could touch. Her mother, Linda, was a strong woman. She worked 2 shifts at a health clinic, came home with aching feet and still tried to manage everything. Grace admired her mother with all her heart. But children need presence, and presence was what was most scarce in that house. There was no shortage of uncles, cousins, weekend relatives who arrived with their opinions formed and left with yet another wound planted. That girl is just like her father. She'll end up the same way. Did you see the way she looks? It's like there's nothing inside. I don't know what Linda expects from this child. Grace heard everything. Children hear everything. And what she heard for years was a version of herself that didn't deserve much, that she was a problem, that she was the burden, not the solution. She grew up with this weight inside her chest, as if it were part of her body. She reached adolescence without knowing exactly what to call what she felt, only knowing that it was too big to contain within one person. In college, she tried to ignore it. She worked hard, graduated in communications, and got a job at a small agency. On the outside, everything seemed to be working. On the inside, it was like trying to fill a leaky bucket. At age 27, the name finally appeared in a doctor's office. Depression with generalized anxiety disorder. And with the name came the hope that now, with the diagnosis, answers would follow. Chapter 2. All Attempts. Grace tried everything. And when I say everything, I'm not using that word in the exaggerated sense that we sometimes use it. I'm using it in the literal sense. Support groups met on Tuesday nights near her house, where everyone shared stories similar to hers, and she would leave feeling that at least she wasn't alone. But the next day, the emptiness would return, just as big. Psychologists, 3 different ones over 2 years. 1 was good, 2 were average, but all of them eventually reached a point where the conversation became circular, and Grace felt like she was telling herself the same story using another person as a mirror. Psychiatrists, medication, dose adjustment, medication change, another adjustment. Some medications took away the pain, but also took away everything else. The ability to feel joy, to feel anger, to feel anything human enough to recognize. And Grace was left wondering what was worse, feeling too much or feeling nothing at all. She wasn't giving up on purpose. She was exhausted in a way that only someone who has tried many times without success can be. It's a different kind of tiredness than laziness. It's the exhaustion of someone who gave everything they had and looked at their own empty hands, not understanding what they did wrong. One Thursday night, Grace was scrolling through Instagram for no reason other than to fill the silence of her apartment when she saw a simple post, a golden ceramic bowl, broken and glued back together with veins of gold running through each crack like rivers on a map. The caption read, "Kintsugi Workshop. Saturday 10 a.m. Limited spaces available." Grace didn't know what Kintsugi was, but there was something about that image she couldn't explain. The cracks were there, visible, and they were the most beautiful parts of the piece. She signed up without thinking too much. Sometimes intuition acts faster than fear. Chapter 3. The Woman Who Repairs with Gold. The workshop took place in a small studio in the Ohio City neighborhood, about a dozen chairs around long tables, pieces of broken pottery in front of each person, pots of lacquer and gold dust in the center. Grace arrived 5 minutes late, chose a chair near the door, still with one foot sticking out as she always did, and stared at the fragments in front of her. The woman at the front of the room was Japanese, around 60 years old, with white hair tied in a simple bun, hands that seemed to know exactly what they were doing all the time. Her name was Naoko. Naoko didn't start by talking about technique. She started with a question. Has anyone here ever broken something they loved very much and thrown it away because they thought it would never be the same again? Almost all hands went up. Grace's too. Naoko nodded slowly, as if the answer confirmed something she already knew. Me too. And for a long time I thought the problem was with me, not with how I viewed the broken things. She then explained Kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken ceramics with lacquer mixed with gold, silver or platinum powder, a technique that is over 500 years old and was born from a simple but radical philosophy. The broken object doesn't need to hide what happened to it. The fractures are part of its history, and that history has value. In the West, said Naoko, when something breaks, we have two options. We throw it away, or we try to glue it back together in a way that the crack doesn't show. We hide it, as if the fact that it broke were a shame. She picked up a fragment of the bowl and held it up to the light. In Kintsugi, we do the opposite. We fill each crack with gold. We make the fracture visible, not to remind us that the bowl broke, but to say, this bowl lived. This bowl went through something, and that something made it unique. Grace felt something stir in her chest. Not the pain, not the anxiety, something else. Something she couldn't immediately identify because it hadn't appeared in a long time. It was recognition. Chapter 4. What Naoko Saw. At the end of the workshop, while the others wrapped up their pieces and chatted animatedly, Grace stood looking at the bowl she had mended. Golden veins ran through the ceramic in every direction. The piece wasn't perfect, it was alive. She went to talk to Naoko. You managed to make it look beautiful, Grace said, trying to keep her voice steady. But what if what's broken isn't a bowl? Naoko looked at her for a long moment. Not the way people look when they're waiting for their turn to speak. The way people look when they're really seeing you. Do you have time now? Naoko asked. Grace said yes. Then come have tea at my house. I live 10 minutes from here. And so it was, without drama, without much decision, that Grace entered one Saturday afternoon into the life of a woman who was about to change the direction of her own life. Naoko's house was small and filled with ceramics, pieces on every shelf, on every surface, some perfect, most with golden veins that ran through each fracture like constellations. Grace walked slowly through the room while Naoko prepared tea, looking at each piece as if they were pages of a book. When they sat down, Naoko didn't ask what had happened to Grace. She asked something different. When you look at those cracks in the bowls, what do you see? Grace thought for a moment before answering. I see that they've been patched up. That's what you see with your eye, Naoko said. But what do you feel? Grace swallowed hard. I feel that these are the most honest parts of the play. Naoko smiled, the kind of smile of someone who was expecting exactly that answer. Now tell me about yours. Chapter 5. Gold in Fractures. Grace told her story. Everything. Her father who left. Her mother who stayed but could barely be there. Uncles and words that stick more than they should. The depression that crept in slowly and then took over everything. The attempts, the psychologists, the medication, the exhaustion of trying, and the fear of having reached her limit. Naoko listened without interrupting once. When Grace finished, they were silent for a moment, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Then Naoko spoke. "You came here thinking you were looking for a cure, but I think you were looking for another way to see what happened to you." "What's the difference?" Grace asked. "A cure attempts to return you to who you were before. Another way of seeing transforms what you've been through into part of who you are." Naoko went to the shelf and picked up one of the bowls, all patched with gold, irregular, asymmetrical, completely unique. This bowl was 200 years old when it broke. The craftsman who repaired it could have thrown it away. It would have been easier. It would have been cheaper. But he understood something that most people still don't understand. The value of this bowl wasn't in the fact that it was perfect. It was in the history it carried, and the fracture was part of that history. Grace looked at the bowl. "Are you telling me that I don't need to be healed? I'm saying that maybe you already are, but you're still trying to erase the marks instead of putting gold on them." Clinical psychologist Bessel van der Kolk, author of the bestseller The Body Remains the Marks, she spent decades studying trauma and recovery. In one of her best-known lectures, she said, "The goal of trauma treatment is not to erase the past. It's to transform the person's relationship with what happened. Healing is not the absence of pain, it's the ability to carry the story without being destroyed by it." And here's what neuroscience confirms. Studies from Tel Aviv University on post-traumatic growth show that 35 to 70% of people who survived highly adverse experiences report at least one aspect of positive personal growth after the trauma. Not despite the trauma. Because of it. This has a name in psychology: post-traumatic growth. And what Kintsugi artistically describes, neuroscience biologically confirms. When we integrate a painful experience into our narrative, instead of trying to erase it, the brain reconstructs connections in a denser, more resilient, and more sophisticated way than before. You don't go back to what you were. You become something that wasn't possible before. Chapter 6. The Four Philosophies. In the following weeks, Grace returned to Naoko's house on Saturdays. Not every week. Sometimes there were good vibes. Sometimes the void returned. But she kept coming back. And Naoko was teaching, not all at once. Slowly, like someone planting things that need time to take root. The first thing Naoko taught was about mono no aware. In Japanese, she explained while they were making tea, this expression means something like the melancholy of things. The awareness that everything is fleeting, that good times pass and bad times pass too, and that there is a silent beauty in accepting this without fighting against it. Grace looked out the window. Outside, the leaves were beginning to fall. It seems sad. It is and it isn't. It's sad in the same way that watching cherry blossoms fall is sad. You know they're going to end. But precisely because they're going to end, you're fully present while they're there. And then Grace understood something that no therapist had been able to make her understand in 2 years of sessions. That recovery wasn't linear because life wasn't linear. That a bad day after a good day wasn't failure. It was the nature of things. And fighting against that, demanding that improvement be constant and perfect, was what was destroying her as much as the depression itself. The second thing Naoko taught was about wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is the beauty of imperfection, of incompleteness, of what is still in process, a wall marked by time, a garden that hasn't been fully pruned, a ceramic tile with irregular edges that no machine could replicate. And what does that have to do with depression? Grace asked with the straightforward skepticism that Naoko had already grown to appreciate. It has to do with comparison, Naoko replied. You compare yourself to an ideal version of yourself that doesn't exist, to who you should be, to who you should have already become. Wabi-sabi says that incompleteness is not the problem. Incompleteness is the natural state of everything that is alive. Grace remained quiet for a while. Then he said, "My mother always said I had untapped potential, ever since I was 8 years old. And you internalized that as proof of inadequacy. Isn't that proof? It's a phrase an exhausted mother said to a child she loved but didn't know how to say. Nothing more. The third philosophy came on a day when Grace was feeling particularly unwell. She called Naoko at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, her voice trembling, saying she couldn't get out of bed. Naoko didn't tell her to stand up. So stay in bed. But tell me, is there one thing, just one thing you can do today that's small enough not to be difficult? Grace was left thinking, may I open the window? Then open the window. That was Ikigai, not the self-help version with 4 circles asking you to discover your grand purpose in life. The original Ikigai, the one from Okinawa, the one researchers found when they studied why those people lived so long and with such a high quality of life. For these people, Ikigai wasn't a mission. It was breakfast. It was the neighbor who passed by every afternoon. It was the plant on the windowsill that needed watering. That was enough. Enough for today. And Naoko had understood that Grace needed to rebuild the future, in doses that depression couldn't destroy all at once. Not one grand purpose. An open window, a cup of tea, a replied message, brick by brick. Chapter 7. The day Grace broke again. 3 months after their first encounter, Grace broke down again. It happened on a Friday. A promotion she had been waiting for a year went to someone else. She got home, locked the door, and lay on the bathroom floor for who knows how long, unable to stop crying. And the old voice returned, the voice of her uncles, the voice that said she was exactly what they always said she would be. She called Naoko. Naoko answered on the second ring. She heard everything. And then he said something Grace never forgot. "Grace, you're on the bathroom floor." "I am. But you called." Silence. "Do you understand what this means? The old version of you wouldn't have called. The old version of you would have stayed silent on the ground until the weight became too much. You called. That's the gold in the cracks. You just put gold in a new crack." Grace took a deep breath. "I don't want to break anymore." "I know, but Kintsugi isn't a promise that you'll never break again. It's a promise that each time you break, you'll know what to do with the pieces." And here's what almost no one talks about when discussing recovery. The biggest obstacle is not the pain, it's a disgrace. Researchers at Brown University have found that people who experience shame about their own suffering are twice as likely to respond to treatment as people who do not carry this shame. Twice, not because the shame is stronger, but because the shame prevents the person from asking for help, accepting help, and believing that they deserve help. And do you know what the antithesis of shame is? It's not self-esteem. It's not confidence. It's the radical acceptance of what happened to you. It happened, that the brands are real and that these brands do not diminish your value. That's exactly what Kintsugi has been teaching for 500 years. The problem wasn't that the ceramic was broken. The problem was the idea that broken ceramic is worthless. Chapter 8. 6 months later. Grace was not cured. This much is clear. There wasn't a single morning when she woke up and the pain simply disappeared. That's not what happens. Any script that promises you that is lying to you. What happened was different and, in many ways, more powerful. She went back to the psychologist, but this time with a difference. She went with a different internal structure. She wasn't looking to be fixed. She was looking to better understand the golden veins that were already forming. She started making pottery, not specifically because of Kintsugi, but because hands occupied with clay were hands that wouldn't be too still with their own thoughts. She wrote a letter to her mother, not to accuse her, to understand. And her mother read the letter crying and said she had never realized how much weight she had placed on words spoken out of exhaustion. She didn't forgive her uncles all at once. Forgiveness doesn't work that way, but she began to understand that their words weren't the truth about her. They were the truth about their pain. And one day in a conversation with Naoko, Grace said, "I still have bad days. I know. But on bad days now I can remember that they're just days." Naoko nodded. "That's mono-inaware. You've learned to let things be fleeting without needing to control them." "I learned because you taught me." "No," Naoko said, "I showed you a golden bowl. You learned on your own." Philosopher and researcher Kristin Neff, who spent decades studying self-compassion at the University of Texas, says something that resonates deeply with everything we are seeing. Self-compassion is not weakness. It is the ability to treat yourself with the same care you would treat a good friend who is suffering. And it is precisely this ability that makes it possible to get through difficult experiences without being destroyed. Neff discovered in his research that people with high levels of self-compassion recover from failures, losses, and traumas significantly faster. Not because they feel less, but because they don't add shame on top of the pain. These people have suffered enough, no more. And Kintsugi, in its essence, is a self-compassion practice with a 500-year history. Kintsugi doesn't ask you to be strong. It asks you to be honest about what's broken and to use gold to reconnect the pieces. Final chapter. What cracks teach us. Today, Grace is 31 years old. She's still seeing a psychologist. She still has difficult weeks. She still carries the scars of a childhood that shouldn't have been the way it was. But she also has something she didn't have before. She has a bowl with veins of gold on the table in her apartment. The same one he made in Naoko's workshop on the afternoon he almost didn't make it. And when the days get tough, she looks at that bowl and remembers. The most beautiful parts of it are the parts that were broken, not despite the cracks, because of them. I know that maybe you're here today because you're also carrying a weight that seems too heavy for one person to bear. I know you may have already tried many things, and that the exhaustion of trying without results has a specific taste that is very difficult to describe to those who don't know it. So let me tell you what Kintsugi would say. You're not too broken to be fixed. You're broken in a way that demands gold, not cheap glue. And the difference between these two types of repair changes everything. To recap what we covered today, Kintsugi teaches us that fractures don't need to be hidden. The wound can be gilded. That what broke within you isn't proof of weakness. It's proof that you lived through something real, and that this experience is part of who you are now, not an exception to be erased. Monono Aware reminds us that both good days and bad days are fleeting, and that trying to force a constant, linear recovery, that you can have a lot of money working little, that you can have a good relationship without needing to be vulnerable, that you are special, and the rules don't apply to you. But today you're going to hear the story of a guy who believed that lie until he lost everything that mattered, and how he discovered that the only thing more expensive than paying the price of sacrifice is paying the price of regret. Before we continue, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like below and comment. What price are you willing to pay in your life? Are you willing to pay the price of sacrifice or the price of regret? Comment below. Now let's get back to the video. Chapter 1. The man who wanted everything without paying anything. Christopher was 28 years old. He worked at a convenience store, earning very little. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment. His salary barely covered the rent. But he had big dreams. He wanted to build a company. He wanted to get in shape. He wanted to travel the world. He wanted to marry Aurora, the girlfriend he loved more than anything. The problem? Christopher wanted all of that, but he didn't want to give up anything. He said he wanted to make money, but he didn't want to work on his company's project in his spare time. Man, I work all day. I get home exhausted. I need to rest. The weekend would arrive and he'd be partying with his friends. Drinks, drugs, fun. Monday would come with a hangover and the excuse ready. I'll start next week. He said he wanted to get in shape. He didn't need to get down to 10% body fat, just around 14%, and have decent health, but he didn't want to wake up early to train. I need sleep to have energy for work. He didn't want to train during his lunch break. Too busy, there's no time. He didn't want to train after work. I get home already exhausted. And what about food? Forget it. He wasn't going to give up fast food, alcohol, or the junk food he ate every day. Man, I work hard. I deserve to have some fun. Aurora saw all of this, and she tried to help. She offered help with the company project. She invited him to train with her. She tried to make healthy food at home. His response was always the same. Sorry. I'll start next week. Now is not a good time. I'm very tired. Until the day she looked at him and said, Chris, I love you, but I can't stand watching you waste your life. I want to grow. I want to leave this town. I want to see the world. And you're exactly where you were when we met years ago. She broke up with him that day. Chapter 2. The Shock of Reality. Christopher spent the first 2 weeks doing exactly what you would do. He drank more. He went out more. He tried to fill the void with the same things that created the void. But there's a problem with losing something you truly love. You can no longer pretend that everything is okay. He looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, a 28-year-old man working a job he hated, out of shape, broke, purposeless, without the only person who truly believed in him. And for the first time in his life, Christopher asked the right question: what do I really want? The answer came quickly. He wanted Aurora back. He wanted to build something with his life. He wanted to look in the mirror and respect the man he saw. But then came the second question, the one that changed everything. How much am I willing to pay for this? Because up until that moment, Christopher had spent his entire life wanting things without being willing to pay the price. He wanted the result, but tried to negotiate the cost, and the universe doesn't negotiate. That night, he was on YouTube trying to distract himself. A video about samurai discipline came on, how they managed to maintain absolute consistency. The guy in the video mentioned a book called Atomic Habits and suggested studying Bushido. Christopher bought the book that night. He began researching the samurai, and he discovered something no one had ever told him about discipline. Chapter 3. The Law No One Wants to Accept. There is a universal principle called the law of sowing and reaping. It's simple. You reap exactly what you sow, no more, no less. If you sow comfort, you reap mediocrity. If you sow discipline, you reap results. There are no shortcuts, no negotiation, no exceptions. The samurai understood something fundamental. The price will always be paid. The only question is when and by whom. You can pay the price of effort today, or you'll pay the price of regret tomorrow. You can pay the price of discipline now, or you'll pay the price of mediocrity for the rest of your life. Christopher read this and something clicked. He had spent 28 years trying to avoid paying the price. And what did he have? Nothing. He had paid anyway, only he paid with lost opportunities, deteriorating health, the love of his life. He realized the price of comfort is infinitely higher than the price of sacrifice. That's when he made the decision. No more negotiations, no more excuses. He was going to pay whatever price was necessary. But there was a problem. He didn't know how. Chapter 4. The Master. Christopher looked for a jiu-jitsu school near his home, not because he wanted to become a fighter, but because he had read that martial arts taught discipline. The school's master was named Kenji, a 55-year-old Japanese-American, a former competitor, a guy who took life seriously. In the first class, Christopher appeared with all the excitement of someone who had just had an epiphany. "Master, I want to change my life. I want to become disciplined. I want..." Kenji raised his hand. "Do you want to, or will you go?" Christopher remained silent. "Do you know the difference between wanting and doing?" Kenji continued. "Wanting is comfortable, doing hurts. Everyone wants. Few do. So tell me, do you want it, or will you do it?" "I go." "Great. Then stop talking and start training." In the first training sessions, Christopher got beaten up, literally. Smaller, physically weaker guys would walk all over him because they had paid the price for the training. He was trying to compensate for years of neglect with 2 weeks of motivation. After the third training session, he approached Kenji. "Master, how long until I get good at this?" "It depends. How much are you willing to pay?" Christopher didn't understand. Chapter 5. Gammon, the Art of Enduring. Kenji explained a Japanese concept called gammon, perseverance through sacrifice, the ability to endure what is difficult without complaining, without giving up, without looking for the easy way out. "Do you see that guy over there?" Kenji pointed to a purple belt on the mat. "He's been training here for 6 years. Do you know how many times he wanted to quit? Hundreds. Do you know how many times he actually quit? 0. That's gammon. In ancient Japan, samurai practiced gammon from childhood. They trained in the cold without complaining. They stayed in painful positions for hours. Not because they liked it, but because they understood that strength doesn't come from comfort, but from enduring discomfort without breaking. Christopher started applying this. He would wake up at 6 a.m. to train before work. Did his body ache? Gammon. Did his mind tell him to give up? Gammon. Did his friends invite him to a party on Friday? Gammon. In the first week, Christopher woke up with his body screaming, his mind bargaining. A day off won't make a difference. But he remembered, the price of comfort is always higher. In the second week, nothing got any easier, but he got stronger. In the fourth week, his friends started commenting, "Ha dude, you're getting boring, you just train, you never go out anymore." Perfect. When the people around you start complaining about your discipline, it's a sign that you're on the right track. A psychologist who has studied resilience for years discovered that the human brain doesn't differentiate between physical pain and emotional pain. When you train your ability to withstand physical discomfort, you automatically increase your tolerance for psychological discomfort. Gammon isn't just philosophy, it's neuroscience. Chapter 6. Ichigo Ichie, the cost of negligence. 2 months later, Christopher was different, slimmer body, more focused mind, but still working at the convenience store. Still no progress on the company project, Kenji realized. You're training your body but neglecting the purpose. Why? I don't have time, master. I work, I train, I'm exhausted. Stop, Kenji interrupted him. Do you know Ichigo Ichi? Christopher denied it. One encounter, one opportunity. Every moment that passes never returns. You're 28 years old now. How old will you be when you finally decide to begin? 30? 35? 40? Every day you choose not to work towards your dream, you're paying with the most expensive thing there is. Time that never comes back. You can't buy back your 20s. You can't recover that moment. That hit Christopher like a punch to the stomach. He had become so focused on training his body that he had forgotten the original purpose. He wanted to build something. He wanted Aurora back, but he was putting it off again. That night, Christopher did a simple calculation. He worked 8 hours a day, he slept 7, he trained 2. That left 7 hours. Where did those hours go? Netflix? Social media? Nothing else? He was wasting 7 hours a day, almost 50 hours a week, 200 hours a month, more than 2,000 hours a year. And he complained that he didn't have time. The truth hurt. He had time. He just didn't want to pay the price of giving up easy entertainment. Chapter 7. Sacrifice for Duty. In Bushido, there is a principle that few truly understand: sacrifice for duty. The samurai does not choose between what he wants and what he must do. He simply does what he must. It's not about motivation. It's not about willpower. It's about recognizing that you have a duty to be the best version of yourself. And duty is non-negotiable. Christopher cut everything off. He deleted Netflix. He uninstalled social media. He stopped hanging out with friends who only wanted to drink. His friends said he was exaggerating. Dude, you need to live a little. But Christopher had finally understood. He had spent 28 years living a little. And where had that led him? Alone, broken, without purpose. He started working on his company's project for 3 hours a night, every day, without exception. On weekends, 6 hours each day. It wasn't easy, it was exhausting. There were nights he almost cried from exhaustion. There were days when his mind screamed at him to give up. But he remembered the principle. The price will always be paid. The only question is whether you pay with effort now or regret later. In the 3rd month, something started to appear. The body was visibly stronger. The company's project was taking shape. People began to notice. But this is where the story gets interesting. Because Christopher was doing everything right. You were paying the price, but he was about to discover that there's an even higher price that no one prepares you to pay. Chapter 8. The Hardest Price. 6th month. Christopher was unrecognizable. He'd lost 15 kilos, earning his blue belt in jiu-jitsu. The company project was progressing. He decided to text Aurora. "Hi, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but I'd like to show you something. Can I meet you?" She agreed. They met in a cafe. Aurora looked at him and immediately saw the difference. His body, his posture. Even the way he spoke was different. "You look different," she said. "Christopher told me everything. The jiu-jitsu, the project, the complete life change. But he didn't ask to come back. He simply said, "I wanted to thank you, for leaving me. It was the best thing anyone ever did for me. You forced me to face the truth. I was a coward. I wanted everything without paying anything. And you paid the price for my cowardice by being stuck with me for years." Aurora remained silent. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," Christopher continued. "I'm here to show you that you weren't wrong about me. You saw something I could be, and I'm finally becoming that." That's when Aurora said something he didn't expect. "Chris, I still like you, I always have. But there's something you need to understand. If we get back together, I won't be the kind of girl who accepts excuses. I won't be the kind of girl who's happy when you try. I'll demand the same level of commitment you're showing now. Forever. Are you ready for that? And here's the price no one tells you. The price isn't just change, it's maintaining the change. It's being that disciplined person, not for 6 months, but for 6 years, for 60 years, until the day you die. That's the real price, and it's terrifying." Chapter 9. The Practice That Never Ends. Christopher looked into her eyes and said, "I am." But he knew it wasn't just about talking. It was about proving it, every single day, for the rest of his life. They returned. But not as before. This time there were rules. This time there were standards. Aurora wouldn't accept excuses. She was training herself. She was building her own career. If Christopher failed, she wasn't going to wait for him to recover. And you know what that did? It forced Christopher to understand something that Bushido has taught for centuries. Discipline is not something you do. It's something you are. You don't practice discipline sometimes. You live discipline constantly without a break. There were bad days. There were weeks when Christopher wanted to give up. There were moments when his body and mind begged for a break. But he remembered, the price of comfort is always higher. The first year passed. The company project became a real business. I wasn't rich, but I was making progress. In his second year, Christopher left the convenience store. He was working full-time in his own business. In their third year, he proposed to Aurora, and she said yes, because he had become a different person. Chapter 10. The Final Truth. Today, Christopher is 33 years old. His company grosses 6 figures annually. He competes in jiu-jitsu. He's married to Aurora. He travels the world. People look at his life and say, "Man, you got lucky." Sort. As if waking up at 6 a.m. for 5 years in a row was luck. As if training when your body screamed to stop was luck. As if working at the business every weekend while your friends drank was luck. Christopher was unlucky. He paid the price. In sacrifice, in discipline, in moments no one saw. And here's the part people don't understand. He still pays every day. Because the price of excellence isn't a one-time fee, it's a lifetime subscription. The difference is that now he knows. The price of comfort would be infinitely higher. It would be waking up at 50 and realizing he wasted his life. It would be looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger. It would be living with the regret of never having tried. The truth no one wants to hear is that you won't have everything you want. That's not how it works. You'll have to choose. You can have the comfort, or you can have the results. You can have the parties, or you can have the body. You can have the easy entertainment, or you can have the business, but you can't have both. Do you know what the cruelest part is? Not choosing is also a choice. When you sit around trying to have both, you've automatically chosen comfort, because comfort is the default. Results require action. The price will always be paid. The only question is, will you pay with effort or with regret? Christopher chose hard work, and today he lives a life most people only dream of. Not because he's special, but because he was the only one